I came across some information from certain podcasters, certain people in the field of the Caitlin Clark department, connected the dots. And everything in this video, I will have to say, is alleged, but it is alarming. But it is not fact, it is alleged. Now, we know the Indiana Fever basketball team is owned by the Simon family. Now, we know Caitlin Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. She got drafted, boom, bow, Christy Size, y'all know the Olympic break, blah, 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 all that stuff happened. She got snubbed, big storyline. Now, what transpired in the second half of the season was that Christy Size came to the realization that she needed to run Caitlin's system and run through Caitlin, and guess what happened? They instantly started winning. And
The meeting that just happened behind closed doors at the Indiana Fever headquarters wasn't a coaching discussion. It was a declaration of war. When Stephen Simon, the owner's son and the man controlling a billion-dollar sports empire, called his head coach, Stephanie White, into his office alongside Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox. He didn't mince words. This was CCTV from here on out. Caitlin Clark's team, her system, her show. And when Stephanie White allegedly hit the roof in protest, Stephen's response was ice cold. You don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. Many of you have been saying for weeks that something was deeply wrong inside that organization, and you were right. What we're about to expose isn't just a coaching disagreement, it's a full-scale power struggle that threatened to destroy the most valuable franchise in women's basketball before it even reached its potential. This is about a generational talent being systematically neutralized, a family legacy hanging by a thread, and a corporate crisis that could have cost the franchise everything they'd built around the biggest name in sports. If you believe the story behind the story matters, smash that like button. It tells us we're on the right track as we filter out the noise and connect the dots that the mainstream sports media refuses to touch. Let's rewind to where this war actually started. When the Indiana Fever won the lottery and drafted Caitlin Clark with the first overall pick, they weren't just selecting a basketball player, they were acquiring a financial revolution. Coming out of Iowa, Clark was the hottest commodity in all of sports. Not just women's basketball, all of sports. Her jersey sales shattered records before she played a single professional game. Ticket demand exploded into the stratosphere. The Fever, a franchise that had been languishing in obscurity for years, suddenly became the center of the basketball universe overnight.
Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. Coming out of Iowa, she was the hottest thing smoking. I said this yesterday, and I've said this before. Caitlin Clark's trajectory was out of here. So, I mean, something like we never seen before. Her coming out of college, man. I've been here, I synced it. And it was just a remarkable feat just to see this young lady come from Iowa, do what she's able to do on the basketball. Caitlin Clark did get hurt, but what else happened? Ticket sales went down, viewership went down, Caitlin Clark buzz went down because that logo 3 Caitlin, we didn't have that logo 3 Caitlin no more. Logo 3 Caitlin.
Herb Simon and his son Stephen had just welcomed a billion-dollar asset into their family business. This wasn't hyperbole. The commercial engine that Caitlin Clark represented was quantifiable and massive. Sponsorship revenue projections showed the Fever would generate nearly $20 million in 2025, 50% higher than any other WNBA team. Major corporate partners like Eli Lilly signed a patch deal worth almost $6 million per year. Salesforce came in with a front-of-shirt deal worth over $3 million annually. Average attendance jumped to over 17,000 fans per game, the highest in the entire league, driving unprecedented national television exposure. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. This was about protecting a commercial powerhouse that had single-handedly repositioned the franchise from a financial afterthought to the most valuable property in women's sports. Every piece of negative press, every sign of internal instability, threatened to cool the interest of those major brands that had just invested millions to be associated with a positive B, forward-moving narrative. But lurking beneath this golden opportunity was a storm brewing, one ignited by the very person hired to guide the franchise into this new era. Head coach Stephanie White arrived with a plan, a rigid basketball philosophy known as the motion offense, a system built on structure, discipline, and shared responsibility. It was a system that, from the very first day of training camp, was on a collision course with the essence of what made Caitlin Clark a generational talent. As the season began, fans immediately noticed something was fundamentally wrong. The Caitlin Clark they had watched dominate college basketball, the fearless shooter pulling up from the logo, the brilliant passer orchestrating chaos and breaking defenses with audacious creativity, was gone. In her place was a player confined, her signature moves stripped away by a slow, methodical system that demanded she play a role, not unleash her genius. The ball was systematically taken out of her hands. Her shot attempts dropped dramatically. That iconic logo three-pointer, the shot that had become her signature and a symbol of a new era in basketball, suddenly became a rare sight. Her once electric body language on the court turned muted and visibly frustrated. Analysts on national television began openly questioning the strategy, wondering why the team wasn't leveraging its most explosive weapon. Social media exploded with side-by-side comparison videos, college highlights versus professional performances, painting a damning picture of a superstar being deliberately held back. It wasn't just the statistics that told the story. It was the energy. Those audacious passes that used to bring crowds to their feet were replaced with safe, predictable plays. The chaos she instilled in opposing defenses, the way she could change the momentum of an entire game with one unconscious three-pointer from 30 feet out. All of it was systematically eliminated by a coaching philosophy that prioritized structure over firepower. And then the business metrics started reflecting the problem. You were onto something when you noticed the buzz cooling off. Ticket sales momentum began to flatten. Viewership numbers dipped. The white-hot excitement that had surrounded her arrival was curdling into frustration and concern. Fans who had bought season tickets specifically to watch Caitlin Clark do Caitlin Clark things were instead watching her stand in the corner, watching her defer, watching her creativity get suffocated by a system that seemed designed to minimize exactly what made her special. Behind the scenes, the Simon family was watching their billion-dollar investment being systematically neutralized, game after game, possession after possession. For Stephen Simon, who operated largely in the background but brought a modern, data-driven perspective to the family business, this wasn't just a coaching disagreement. This was a branding catastrophe. This was a business crisis. Every single game where Clark looked restrained was a missed commercial opportunity, a dip in merchandise momentum, a cooling of the buzz that drove everything they had built. He saw the metrics in real time, the declining social media engagement, the comments from disillusioned fans threatening to cancel their subscriptions, the questions from nervous corporate partners wondering if they had invested in the right property at the right time. This was a business, and the flagship product was being badly mismanaged right before their eyes, jeopardizing relationships with the league, with sponsors, with the very foundation of what they were trying to build. The initial excitement was turning into alarm, and the blame was being placed squarely on a rigid coaching system that seemed to prioritize philosophy over the commercial reality of modern sports. And that's when the real war began. But then something shocking happened midway through the season, a dramatic turnaround that would expose just how wrong the initial approach had been. Allegedly under intense pressure from ownership, the Fever began abandoning the strict motion offense and started running their entire system through Caitlin Clark. Let her bring the ball up with purpose. Let her scan the floor for opportunities. Let her take those deep, demoralizing three-pointers. Give her the freedom to be exactly what made her special in the first place. And guess what happened? They started winning. Not just winning, they started dominating. The team found a rhythm, clawed their way into playoff contention, and ultimately secured a playoff spot for the first time in years. You could feel the change instantly. Clark was suddenly orchestrating again, her head on a swivel, creating chaos for opposing defenses. Those no-look passes came flooding back. The energy in the arena became electric, a direct reflection of the freedom their star player was finally being given. The Fever weren't just winning games, they were fun to watch again, and the business metrics immediately reflected it. But here's where the story gets truly explosive. If you're connecting these dots and seeing what we're seeing about the power dynamics inside professional sports, drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened in that meeting. We're building something here, and your perspective matters. This dramatic success didn't calm the waters inside the organization. It exposed the fault lines that had been there all along. Reports suggest Stephen Simon was absolutely furious. He saw this dramatic U-turn as undeniable proof that Stephanie White's initial system had been holding both the team and their superstar back from the very beginning. All those early losses, the stagnant offense, the frustrated fans, the cooling buzz, all of it could have been
This stuff is not going to be in order, guys. But let's read this. It says, now after that meeting I just mentioned, Steve Simon called Kelly Christoph, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White into his office and let them know, not uncertain terms, that this was CC team from here. What I understand and what I was told when Stephanie White was told this, she hit the roof because she didn't like it. And Steve Simon told her, you don't have to like it, but it's that way. Now, this is, from my understanding, this is a conversation that happened at the conclusion of the season.
Reading between the lines of what happened next, whispers emerged of an explosive private meeting that took place near the conclusion of the season. Stephen Simon allegedly called General Manager Kelly Krauskopf, Team President Amber Cox, and head coach Stephanie White into his office. The message delivered was said to be brutal in its clarity and impossible to misunderstand. From here on out, this was Caitlin Clark's team. The experiment was over. The future of the franchise would be built around her unique talents, not in spite of them. This was CCTV now, whether anyone liked it or not. When Stephanie White allegedly hit the roof in protest, arguing for her system and her coaching authority, Stephen Simon's response was ice cold and final. You don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't a negotiation. This was the owner's son, operating with the full weight of family authority, making it crystal clear that protecting Caitlin Clark and the commercial empire built around her was the only priority that mattered. The implications of that meeting reverberated through the entire franchise. Players became careful about what they said and to whom, afraid of choosing the wrong side in a war they didn't start. Morale inside the locker room reportedly cratered. The trust between the front office and the coaching staff had been shattered beyond repair. It was at this breaking point that Stephen Simon allegedly made his most powerful move yet. He called for an internal review, demanding written reports from coaching and medical staff about every single decision made regarding Clark's handling throughout the season. This wasn't a request. This was an inquisition. He wanted a paper trail, and everyone in that building knew exactly what it meant. Someone was going to be held accountable for the chaos. The message couldn't have been clearer. No one was safe from scrutiny. And the owner's son was now firmly in command, ready to clean house if necessary, to protect the investment and the empire they had built. For context, you need to understand what the Simon name represents in Indiana sports. Herb Simon, the family patriarch and a newly minted Hall of Famer, didn't just build a basketball team when he and his brother Mel purchased the Pacers back in 1983 for $11 million. They built an institution rooted in stability, saving the franchise from potential relocation and embedding it into the heart of Indianapolis for the long term. This was about legacy, not just championships. Quiet, resilient stewardship that had earned him the sport's highest honors. But now, the public turmoil and allegations of internal dysfunction surrounding the Fever weren't just bad press. They were a direct stain on a lifetime's work. The narrative was shifting from Herb Simon, Hall of Famer, to Herb Simon, owner of a franchise in chaos. For a man whose reputation was his most valuable currency, this was devastating. His son Stephen, forced into the spotlight, brought a completely different perspective. A tech-oriented venture capitalist who had carved his own path in San Francisco, Stephen saw the game through a 21st century lens where a player's brand power was a tangible asset to be maximized. The alleged mishandling of Caitlin Clark wasn't just a coaching misstep in his eyes. It was a catastrophic failure to understand the modern sports economy. He wasn't just defending a player. He was protecting the future valuation of the entire franchise. Relationships with corporate partners worth tens of millions of dollars, and the family legacy that his father had spent 40 years building. As the internal drama leaked beyond the walls of the Fever's front office, the crisis expanded on a national scale. The WNBA league office, enjoying unprecedented growth largely fueled by Clark's arrival, could not afford a scandal involving its brightest star. An internal investigation into the Fever's handling of player welfare would almost certainly trigger league intervention, potentially leading to fines, mandates, or forced protocol changes. Major corporate partners like Eli Lilly and Salesforce, who had invested millions to be associated with a positive narrative, would be deeply alarmed. These companies have strict brand safety guidelines. Association with a franchise embroiled in allegations of player mistreatment and internal chaos is toxic, and Stephen Simon would be acutely aware that anxious calls from sponsors would follow, demanding answers and assurances. The foundation of the Indiana Fever has been cracked beyond easy repair. What began as a coaching philosophy clash spiraled into a full-scale power struggle, exposing a deep divide between ownership's vision and the coaching staff's authority. The trust is gone. The silence is deafening. And with Stephen Simon now taking direct and forceful control to defend both his star player and his family's empire, a fundamental change is not just likely, it's guaranteed. The only question that remains is who will be the first to fall when the final decisive move is made. Will Stephanie White survive this war? Can the relationship between ownership and coaching ever be repaired? Or is this franchise headed for a complete reset that will shock the entire league? We'll be tracking every development in this explosive situation, so make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss what happens next when the other shoe finally drops. The future of an entire franchise hangs in the balance, all because of a war that started from within. This is what happens when billion-dollar investments collide with coaching egos, and someone has to win. Thanks for diving deep with us on this one. We'll see you in the next investigation.